Hey there. It's another lovely week. I hope you have your beverage and are mm, ready for a little bit of conversation. Once again, I'm Wonder Wendy, the imperfect prophet. And I've been thinking about balance a lot. It comes up a lot in conversation. And then I realized, do you ever think about those roadside sobriety checks? Not necessarily because you've been drinking, but if you have been, you probably shouldn't be driving. But if you see them and you think, wow, could I pass that test even sober? I mean, walking with one foot directly in front of the other and keeping my balance. Believe it or not, for a lot of people over the age of 50, worse yet, over 60, and sometimes over 70 and 80, just keeping balance and staying on your feet is hard. And that's sad. Balance, the very center of how we move forward and stay upright. But as our bodies age, it's a temptation to shuffle. It's a temptation to not lift our feet and walk with surety. And the more you shuffle and the less you lift your feet, the more your body is going to actually degrade and get used to walking that way. And all these little muscles that you should be using aren't being used. So if you fear you can't pass a sobriety test, walking in a line, even when you're not drunk, then maybe you should be doing some exercises. Take a yoga class, get some physical therapy, do what you need to do because mobility is so important. And I recently saw somebody post about that. I'm trying to remember what social media platform it was. She was talking about going to visit an elder in an assisted living facility and the horror of realizing that losing your mobility further degrades your quality of life. And she said, who cares about a bikini body? Get out and get your body moving. And as you know, I'm a big advocate of yoga because not only does it help your body, it helps your balance, it helps your mobility, it helps you not age quite so quickly. If yoga's not your jam, totally understand. It wasn't mine either. But find something, get out of the chair and start moving. But balance sounds so easy, doesn't it? You know, you look at those scales, and if you have the same amount of weight here and the same amount of weight here, the scales stay even. That is literally balance. But think about it. Those of you who are my age or a little bit older, remember those things on the playground that we called seesaws or teeter totters? I think now they call them guillotines and death, and they're not on playgrounds anymore. But they've a lot of fun. And I spent hours on the teeter totter or seesaw. Depending on the day, I use both terms. And if you'll recall, that teeter totter wasn't always even. So sometimes you have two little kids and one big kid, and they would balance each other out, and you could ride the teeter totter. Or you could have two on either end if you kind of equalized each other. But if one kid was really small, they could get launched to the moon. As the big kid would go, boom, and they get pegged up. It's called physics, people. Yeah. If you rode a teeter-totter, you studied basic physics. You may not have understood it, but you studied basic physics. There was another aspect of that teeter-totter, and I don't know if you remember it, but I do. There were usually in the center, it wasn't just one, what we call the fulcrum, that the teeter-totter rode on. There were 3 or 4, 5, I don't know. There were different little places. And if you moved the teeter-totter to one of the side pieces, one of those different divots, you could balance out different weights a little bit easier. So the smaller kid would be on the longer end, and the larger kid would be on the shorter end. And that helped balance out that teeter-totter. So you didn't launch the smaller kid to the moon. But it was awfully fun when the bigger kid hit the ground and you get that, as long as you're hanging on and don't go over and lose 3 teeth. I think that's why we don't have teeter-totters anymore, but dang the fun they're missing out on. We did so many dangerous things that are now banned, and kids don't have nearly as much fun as we had. In my humble opinion, that said, teeter-totters, balance. When is balance not what we think it is? So often we think balance is equal part here, and it stays even. Like I said, those scales, like you see on the scales of justice, those were the original weighing devices. In the marketplace, you would have little set weights, and you would weigh that against what you were buying. So you would agree on what the error was, what the weight was. But a teeter-totter proves you that balance isn't always equality. It's evening out the differences. So as we discuss our lives, because work-life balance and life balance, if you're not working anymore, comes up a lot. I think life balance is kind of an illusion because it's not the same for everybody. Some people love their jobs. I have a girlfriend who is so into math and numbers. She was interviewing for a position and had to do analytics on a math problem before the third interview. And I said, "How are you enjoying your day off?" And she said, "I'm working on this math problem and it's so much fun." Can't relate, not for me. But for her, that was fun. So it's not really work. And therefore, how do you weigh that on those scales? Is that work? Is that life? Good question. And so we always are talking about this notion of balance. Is it real? Is it not real? Or is it just what works for you? Somebody else's normal shouldn't be your normal. If you have a friend who wants to be a full-time mom and has the economics to do so, why would you judge her for being a full-time mom? If she's happy, if she's happy. But if she's looking for fulfillment, then that's okay too. Find that balance. You know, June Cleaver did stay home all day with her kids. By the way, that's another age reference. And even I didn't watch Leave It to Beaver, but I've heard about it. So if you are my age, you've heard about it. If you're a little bit older, you may have watched it. Actually, if you're a little bit younger, you might have watched it on Nick at Night when they were playing classic television. But June Cleaver was the mom of this ideal 50s family. She wore her string of pearls, her perfect little dress. You know, even when she was vacuuming, she was wearing kitten heels. My God. Anyway, she was this ideal feminine aspect. But was she? I mean, really, who lives their life like that? And she wasn't home all the time. She had PTA and junior league. She had other obligations. So again, I'm questioning balance. And what does that mean to you? Just a thought. There are so many elements in life that if you don't have something, it's a scarcity. But if you have too much of it, it's a plague. Look at the Southeast United States right now versus the Western United States. In the Southeast, they've been buried under a deluge of water. They've had flash flooding and incalculable damage due to that. Meanwhile, we have fires in California that they would be so grateful for that water. Now, those fires in California think fire's bad. Well, fire's not bad. My ancestors settled northern New England. Without fire, they couldn't have survived. They needed to stay warm. They needed to cook. It was always a present danger. You know, people died because somebody didn't tend the fire properly and the house burned down, or they slept so close to the fire to try and stay warm that somebody got burned. Really sad stories about life in the early settlements. But again, it's about the balance. There are places where we need light, we need heat, we need fire, we need it. It's a resource. There are places where we need the fires to stop. There are places where we need water. There are places where they have too much water. Balance is a tough thing, just like our own diets. I mean, we can't stop eating because our bodies need nutrients to survive. Our body needs food as fuel. But if we're not putting in the right fuel, or we're putting in too much fuel or the wrong fuel, we're slowly killing our bodies. You know, it's an interesting discussion. What is enough? What is too much? Staying hydrated, really important. But there are fraternity boys who, and I shouldn't say just fraternity boys, but most of the stories I've heard, it happened in fraternities, where people have drowned by super hydrating, and we're talking drinking gallon water and flooding their systems. They have died from drinking too much water. We know people can drown from too much water, but if you don't have water, drinkable water, you can't survive. So back to that question of balance, and how do you keep your life in balance? And what does that look like for you? Not what it looks like for me, because I need time with people and I need time alone. You know, But it's always about that fine line. If I'm left alone too long, I get a little stir crazy. But if I'm not ever getting time alone, I kind of turn into a sociopath. I get grumpy and cranky and hard to deal with because I can't hear myself think. And I need that time. So, how do you find it? How do you find balance? And maybe we should stop looking for balance. Maybe it's an elusive word because only you know when you're in balance. Oh my gosh. I'm trying to remember what those things were called. There was a thing that we had in my house growing up that my siblings had, and it had like a wooden barrel that was about maybe a foot long and 8 inches in diameter. And you put a board on top of that. What do they call them? Boogie boards? Something like that. Let me know if you remember these things. Did your family have one too? I think it came out of the surfing tradition because it helped you work on keeping your body balancing even as it's moving. And that was a real challenge. Now, the only time I see those are jugglers who are insane trying to juggle well on one of those things. I never mastered it. I was really pleased if I could stand still on that. We'll call it a boogie board because no, boogie boards were the things for swimming. Those were I don't know. But these balance boards that were something that came out of the 60s. There was one in my house when I was growing up. And like I said, if you know what it is, please message me and let me know what that thing was. Being in balance was kind of an illusion because you could have your body leaning one way and your feet going the other, and it would stay in balance. You weren't falling off. But if it shifted ever so slightly, that board would go shooting out and you were on the floor, and you really were grateful that your parents had wall-to-wall carpeting. Trust me, I fell down more than a few times, but it was fun. It was great exercise, great for the stabilizer muscles. So maybe we should bring those back, but always on a carpeted floor. Just a thought. We're talking a lot about this in our lives right now. What is important? What can we let go of? How do we keep a balance of, dare I say it, power? Because power has a lot of negatives to it as well. And it's great when you have it, but it's not always great when other people have it, especially when they're people who don't support the same ideas as you. I think we're going to be talking about that particular topic a lot in the near future, but I'm not going to get into it because I don't want to deal with the politics of who's our side or what's going on. But I do want us to think about what we consider a balance. And if things seem to be shifting off to the other direction, you feel that board shifting away from you, what can you do in your own world to bring things back so you don't go crashing to the floor? Ooh. See what we did there? There's an outside world. There's gravitational forces that you can't change. You cannot change gravity unless you go into space. But I'm ready to assume that most of my listeners are not going into space soon. Although if I did get an offer to follow in Captain Kirk's footsteps and take that launch into space, I'd probably say yes, because that's who I am. But I don't see Jeff Bezos calling me anytime soon. But hey, Jeff, I'd love to go to space if you have an extra seat. But you can't control gravity. You can't control all the forces in your life. You can't control the weather. There's a lot in life that we can't control. What can you control? Your attitude. One of my yoga instructors loves to say, and she says it almost every class she teaches, happiness is not a destination. It is the attitude with which we travel. In other words, if you are spending your life trying to get to happiness, you are doing it wrong because you're always chasing a goal which will be an illusion to you. You cannot chase happiness. You can find things that make you happier, but you cannot find happiness. Happiness is in you, and you have to choose to embrace it. If you're sitting home alone and miserable, do you know who can change that? Only you. When was the last time you invited somebody over? When was the last time you got out and participated in your community? When was the last time you interacted with others? A neighbor invited me over for cocktails the other day. She was getting a few ladies together. When it was time to go, oh my gosh, both my husband and I had a strange headache that afternoon. And I suddenly realized, wait, we both got a headache at the same time. Air quality issues. Opened the door. We both started to feel better. So clearly there was something going on in our house. But what do you do? How do you find it? What do you know what's going on? We're not smelling anything. We don't have a carbon monoxide detector. So my husband went out to get a carbon monoxide detector, and I'm feeling a little off. I'm really not feeling like I want to go to the neighbor's house for cocktails. But I realized that being a connected neighborhood is really important to me. And really, so many of us should be knowing who our neighbors are. It makes you safer. It makes sure that somebody else is kind of aware of your existence. I always said it when I was an army wife and I was often left home alone. I would like that somebody would discover me injured before I die and they smell the body. I know, kind of gross, right? But there were horror stories of people who were so isolated and disconnected that they weren't discovered until somebody smelled the body. Ew. How do you make sure that doesn't happen to you? How do you make sure that people show up at your funeral and say, I'm going to miss that bitch? You know what? You can say that about me. I'm fine. But you have to be connecting with your community. You have to be getting out of your own way. It's time for you to connect with your community. By the way, we got a carbon monoxide detector. I shouldn't leave that one dangling. It didn't go off. So we don't know what happened, but now we're prepared. And I will advise that you should get a carbon monoxide detector because it's really stupid that we didn't have one until yesterday. And in fact, our house has enough footprint that I think we should get a second one. But the one we have is near the bedroom where the danger is the greatest of you not recognizing that you are slowly asphyxiating and you will never wake up again. Yet that's what a carbon monoxide detector prevents. So get one if you don't have one. I know it's a weird thing to feature, but we didn't always have those when I was a kid, and we don't always think of it. And after that weird headache yesterday, it seems ever so important. And I'm so glad I went out and hung out with these ladies because one of the women who attended our gathering last night turned out to be one of the original owners of my house. She moved out of here many years ago, but it was so cool to feel that I had touched some of the history of my house. And she's such a lovely woman. I hope to see her again. So you never know what's going to happen when you say yes, when you go out and you connect, when you visit with people. And, if she's inviting you over for some wine and you say, I don't really like wine, is it okay if I bring my favorite beverage? If she says no, that's a weirdo. But odds are, and we'll say, I'd love for you to come, whatever you're drinking. That's fine. And I was grateful I brought my own red wine because she had white and rosé, which I'll drink, but I don't like as much as I like a red wine. So I brought my own red wine and they drank all their white and their rosé, and then they drank some of my red, and that was fine. So balance. It seems elusive because the very nature of balance is that it's always changing. It's hard to have just the right amount of water. It's hard to have just the right amount of heat. Hard to keep things perfectly in balance, which means you're always working on it. But as we talked about when I talked about walking, if you are always walking on smooth, even ground and you are not lifting your feet, you aren't developing the skills you need when life gets out of balance. You aren't developing the skills you need when you trip and fall. Learning to trip and fall well is important. I know it seems contradictory. We don't want to fall, but learning to fall well is important. And I like to say I learned this from my mother. She was in her 70s, went down a flight of stairs. Oh my God, women in their 70s going down a flight of stairs. How many times have you heard of that being a very sad ending? She got distracted, didn't realize there were stairs there. Boom, 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 boom. Bless her heart. She was beat up. She looked pretty bad. Didn't break a single bone. So two things. She'd always walked. She walked a lot. So she had pretty good muscle tone and flexibility. I don't know how she learned to fall well. Maybe she was just a relaxed individual, but I knew her when she was uptight. Sometimes that was not fun. And she'd also had a lot of milk when she was a kid. Calcium, all the basics. So keep your balance. Keep working on your balance. Don't be afraid to slip out of balance and have to work on it, because that will give you tools to be successful in the future. So when you feel out of balance, know this is a test. Know you're learning for a better future. And that's really my message for this week. And I'm looking forward for someone to tell me what that stupid thing was called with the barrel and the board that we would do the thing. And I look forward to hearing from you. And next week, we're going to talk about all the change I've been following lately. I've found 34 cents in the last week. And that's what we're going to talk about next week. Want to hear more? Tune in next week, and I will talk to you soon. Until then, stay hydrated. I'm Wonder Wendy. I'm the imperfect prophet who's perfect. Even Mary Poppins was only practically perfect in every way. Have a wonderful week. We'll talk to you soon.